Okay, so it's a great privilege today to speak to our colleague and the renowned strength and conditioning coach, Mike McGurn. Mike, how's it going today?
Not too bad. The weather's nice. It's sunny here. It's warm. We're out running around the back garden, so not too bad. We're getting by okay.
Good stuff. You were telling me that you're one of the lucky ones that has a bit of space outside, and that you're trying to get out in that as much as possible.
Yeah. We've a wee football pitch out the front for the kids and a player out the back. So once they finish their homeschooling at 2:30, 2:30, we can get out and run about and do some training, have some PE, play some Gaelic, play a bit of soccer. So it's all good. All good. It's not the worst.
How are you enjoying the role of schoolmaster?
Tough. 11-year-old, 9-year-old, and 5-year-old. So you're trying to teach 3 different subjects at the same time, or sorry, not teach, supervise. But now it's not going too bad. The kids are pretty good. They've been good through all this, and I didn't realize how tough primary school is since this lockdown. I wouldn't like to go back to it.
Yeah, absolutely agree with you on that one. So what sort of sports are your kids gravitating towards then? You mentioned a few. What do they have an interest in?
Yeah, well, all different. The eldest one, he likes playing football. The middle child, she likes camogie, Gaelic, and she likes doing a bit of running. She likes basketball, and the youngest one's more creative. She's in the dance. So she asked me yesterday when the lockdown's over, can we enroll her in the dance school? So what the hell? So listen, but we don't push them into sport. We let them choose themselves and do whatever they want to do, and it's up to them. And I don't actually go to any of the sporting sessions. I let my wife do it because I don't want to be perceived as the big bad coach sitting watching them. So I let her do all that. I just take them for fun sessions at night time. It gives me an hour outside running on the garden with them and keeping my hand in coaching, and I've always said if you can coach young kids and you can coach anybody, coaching international athletes is easy compared to young kids, so it keeps my hand in that respect, so.
So it's interesting you say that your middle child is interested in a range of sports. Do you think that's an important thing for young people? How do you balance having an interest in pursuing multiple kind of sports and activities versus specializing?
Yeah, I think at a young age you do have to have a generalized approach. I mean, I've always said the 3 sports that every child should be made do. If anybody from the government's listening, it should be athletics, swimming, and gymnastics because it gives you an all-round physical presence. It also gives you an appreciation of body awareness and body movement, but also the benefits of your mobility, you increase in power, and life skills. Like if you fall into a lake or a river and you can swim, you can save your life. So those 3 are very, very important. I think every child should try and experience all those 3 that I mentioned,
Yeah, and can I take you back maybe to your own childhood? Can you tell us a bit about where you grew up and how you became interested in sport, and where your sort of love for this way of life comes from?
Yeah, I grew up in Enniskillen. I come from a big GA family. At the time, my uncle was the chairman of the Fermanagh GA. In fact, I think his name is Joe McGurn. He was the longest serving chairman in Ireland. At one stage, I think he served on the board for 20 years as vice chairman and chairman. So he used to bring me to all the Fermanagh games. And believe it or not, I used to be the mascot for the Fermanagh team. But so I always grew up with a great love of GAA. I also was very interested in football and soccer. And when I started playing soccer, he stopped talking to me because back then that was it. You couldn't play what he called a foreign sport on a Saturday. So I played football for Enniskillen Rangers on a Saturday and Gaelic for Enniskillen Gaels on a Sunday. Not very good at either, to be honest, very poor at both. But then through my love of sport, I also got very interested in long distance running. My mother sent me down to Balmullet, where she's from, for the summer, one summer. And an uncle of mine through marriage is the great Willie Joe Padden, who played for Mayo midfield. So I was down in Balmullet, and Willie Joe and the 3 of the boys were going for a run. I think I was 14, 15 at the time, and I joined them for a run. I think it was like an 8, 9, 10 mile run. And I'd never really done much running before, but I kept up with them for the first 8 mile, and then the last mile ago kicked on and beat them. So I sort of discovered I had a bit of not a talent, a growth for long distance running, and I got interested in that. So I tried to marry the the three together, playing football, Gaelic, and doing long distance running at the one time. And like I said, I wasn't very good at Gaelic football, but I made bigger improvements in running. And then through my running achievements, I got awarded a scholarship to the States for athletics and spent 4 years over there studying and competing and training. You know.
And so that was the end of the soccer and the Gaelic football at that stage. You sort of moved to specialise in the athletics then?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I wasn't going anywhere with Gaelic football anyway. I played Fermanagh vocational schools, and that was as far as I was going to go. I was never going to make the Fermanagh minor team or the Fermanagh senior team. I was never going to get a semi-professional contract with Glentoran or Linfield, so I wasn't that good. So I went over to the States and studied there and trained for 4 years and got my degree, and that's when I first picked up my real interest in strength and conditioning. I went to a place called Temple University in Philadelphia. There was 40,000 students at the university in Philly, and I think I was the only Irish student there. So I was a bit of a novelty back then. And what I used to do then was I used to go and watch all the various different sports who provided scholarships. So I used to go watch the basketball team train. I used to go watch the American football team train, the gymnastics team train. And I got a real fascination of how they all train so different, Whereas when I was involved at home in football and Gaelic, we did the same training for both sports. So I picked up pretty quick there that it was more specialised over in the States. And I took a real interest in strength and conditioning. And because I was doing a sports science degree, then we were doing weight modules, we were doing fitness modules, speed modules, agility modules, Olympic lifting modules, gymnastic modules. So it gave me a real appreciation of all the different sporting modalities out there and how they apply to different sports at different times. And it was a real massive learning curve for me. The other big thing then that really helped me, again, because I was a bit of a novelty at the university, I got to do 3 internships or 3 work experiences. One with the Philadelphia Eagles, which is NFL. One with the Philadelphia 76ers, which is NBA. And one with the Philadelphia Flyers, which is NHL. So I got to experience those 3 professional sports, which was amazing when you're 17, 18 years old. And, it really gave me the sort of the thirst or the grow to get involved in strength and conditioning in a big way. And when it came to the running career, again, I wasn't very talented. I just worked hard, and wasn't really going very far with my running career. So I realised, let's use my scholarship to get the best degree I can, get lots of experience in strength and conditioning, and hopefully when you go back home, you'll get to use that in some shape or form. So I didn't know how, because it really hadn't come into play much back home at the time, So I ended up graduating, going back home, and there was no jobs in what I did. So I took a 6-month job in Fermanagh College of Further Education, and I taught on the BTEC in Sports Studies. I think I was doing a maternity cover at the time, and then I started applying for jobs in England, and then I got a post in Workington as a lecturer in sports science.
And I suppose that's where this initial, step into professional life of working with teams began, is in Workington then, and it was in the sport of rugby league that you really began your kind of career as a strength coach in earnest, was it?
Yeah, again, it was a real fluke how that happened. Went over to Workington College, and started lecturing in sports studies, sports science. But some of the modules that we were doing, they weren't similar to the ones I did in Fermanagh, and I picked up a lot of sports science knowledge in the States. So I'd asked the head of the college, could we maybe devise our own course? And they said, okay, well, let me see. So they went through the moderator in BTEC and A-levels and said, yeah, you can. So I got a chance to devise my own course in sports science. But to be honest, Workington was great from 9 to 5 because I was working. But come 5 o'clock, I was going home to sit in an empty flat on my own. So I was bored, too much energy. So I started doing circuits to music for the staff. So staff would come in after the lectures were over, and I'd take them for a circuit session done to music because I'm big in I love music. So they'd work while the music was playing, and then when the music stopped, move on to the next circuit, that kind of way. And one day I was doing this, and towards the end of the session, I noticed there was like a gang of 20, 25 massive 16-stone players outside the door. And what I hadn't realised was the local rugby league team, Workington Town, had booked to use the gym after we'd finished. So just as we're finishing up the session, I started putting the stuff away, and the coach, who was Australian, Peter Watts, said, "Oh, mate, I see what you're doing there. Would you mind taking my boys for a session?" Terrible Australian accent. So I'm like, yeah, why not? And so rather than put the stuff away, I said, well, why don't you just do what we just did with the staff? He said, yeah, great, no problem. So players waltzed in, staff left. I said, see you on Tuesday, where they went. But some of the players started messing around. And maybe I'm like, listen, don't touch my stuff. Stand in the corner. Don't talk till I tell you, blah, blah, blah. And they looked at me like kind of like shocked. And the coach looked at me and he winked. So I took them for the session. They seemed to enjoy it. The players left, and we got chatting to the coach. And he says, mate, I really enjoyed what you did. Have you ever taken a rugby league team before? And I said, not only have I never taken a rugby league, I never even watched the game. And he said, when you come down Sunday, I'll get you some tickets. Come watch us play. We're semi-pro. We get around sort of 5,000-6,000 fans. Come down, watch, see what you think. I goes, yeah, okay, no problem. So Bob down that Sunday. Went down, typical nerd that I do, went and watched the warm-up, what they did. They went back in, watched them come out and play. And I found the game fantastic. The contact, the physicality, the non-stop action. I didn't really understand the rules because I was never really a fan of rugby union the whole time I was at home. And obviously when I went away to the States, I never got to watch any rugby. So I watched the rugby league, and straight away I was hooked. So I said to him again, do you mind if I come and watch again? He said, yeah, definitely come next week. So I watched again. And he was a really nice fellow, the coach. And he said, listen, I'd really like you to come train the team. And I said, well, I don't really have any knowledge of rugby league. Let me come and play a couple of games for your third team. And at the time, I was still doing running training, very, very fit. Well, I thought very, very fit. So I come down one Thursday night, and I was going to play for the third. So they put me on the wing. And he said, look, just when you get the ball, catch it and run and don't stop. That was grand. So I stood out in the wing, and after about 7 minutes, I finally got the ball. I ran into a tackle. I got absolutely smashed. Got up, played the ball. It took me about 5 minutes to recover. I did it again about 5 minutes later. I got smashed again, and I had to come off the pitch. I was absolutely busted. And for about a week, my neck, my head, my shoulders, my ribs, everything hurt. But it gave me a real appreciation of the energy systems that you need to work on for rugby league. So then I got involved, taking them for training 2 nights a week. Through his contacts, I went to visit the likes of Wigan, Leeds Rhinos, Bradford Bulls. I watched what they did, took that back up to Workington, put my own slant on it, and then I became a so-called rugby league fitness coach, which is brilliant. I did that for 2.5 years.
So just to put that in a bit of perspective of where Workington were at that stage in the kind of grand scheme of the sport, were they in the top tier, or were they further down when you started working with them?
Right. Again, we were in what was it called, the old Stones Bitter Division 1, but we were at the bottom when I started, and that was the particular year that Rupert Murdoch had come in and said the top 10 will be moved into a thing called Super League, and I'll give each team something like $500,000. I'm going to put the game on Sky Sports, and you will be part of a massive new sort of a sport called Super League. So you had to finish in the top 10, and if you finish in the top 10, then you got Murdoch's millions for years to come. So we ended up getting a bit fitter. We moved our way up the table. We finished 8th then in the table, and that meant we got to go into Super League. So it secured our future for a couple of years.
And so you mentioned that Workington at that stage were a semi-professional team. So were any of the teams in the league fully professional at that stage, or was it an even keel in that way?
No, at the time, Wigan and Bradford and Leeds were the 3 big teams. They were professional. Everybody else was semi-pro. But if you made Murdoch's top 10 and you were given all the Murdoch money, Sky money, then you had to go full time. So then we ended up going full time. So it was a real sort of leap of faith for me, because it meant that I would have to lecture as well as do the full-time training, which was grand. I didn't mind that, but more so for the players, because A lot of them worked in Sellafield. They worked down in Barrow and Furness. We had players from Lancashire, from Yorkshire, who would have to give up their jobs with our taxi drivers, whatever it was, and go full time. And then we trained 4 times a week and played on Sundays. But it was a fantastic time to be involved in rugby league. It was very exciting.
Mm-hmm.
They were getting far bigger crowds. It was televised on Sky. It also meant that we were joining with the Australian Rugby League, who were also good in the Super League. And we got to play in the World Club Challenge, which meant we went over to Australia to play them. They came to play us. And it was a fantastic time to be involved, you know.
And am I right in saying that eventually then you were part of the St. Helens side, which won the treble and which competed in that competition as well then a few years later?
Yeah, but before that, Conor, what I did was I spent 3 years at Workington, and then David Lloyd, the Davis Cup tennis captain and brother of John Lloyd, he had heard of what I'd done at Workington, and he asked me would I move down to Hull and do the rugby league team at Hull and the football team as well, because he had bought in both teams and both stadiums and both franchises, and his plan was to merge them into one, to have one training base that I take all the training, and then to play out of the one stadium, and then he could sell the land off for development. So he did that. So I gave up Workington completely, quit the lecturing, quit the rugby league team, went to Hull, and I spent 3 years there as head of fitness for the football team, Hull City, and the rugby league team as well. So again, it was a leap of faith, but again, it was a fantastic opportunity. I had a great time in Hull, a really sporting prowess, a really sporting city, and spent 3 years there. And then I moved on to Leeds, where I worked with the Leeds Rhinos as well as Leeds United. And then I made the move to St. Helens, you know. So
yeah. It's really fascinating and a really interesting time, as you say, in the development of the sport itself. I mean, at that time, I suppose the strength and conditioning side of things had really started to come into soccer, as you say. To what extent was it more prevalent around sport generally in Ireland than in Britain?
In that time?
Yeah.
It still hadn't really kicked in Ireland at all as much. I mean, like we're talking back then, we're talking 1999, 2000. So, you know, the likes of Armagh in GAA had only just discovered strength and conditioning then, like Aidan O'Rourke's time, Joe Kiernan's time. In other sports, it was barely even mentioned. It definitely wasn't involved in any soccer teams. You know, even in the provinces in rugby, it wasn't taking place. I know in the Irish Rugby Union team, the person that was there before me, Craig White, had just started doing it with the Irish national team. You know, so it was in its infancy. It was in rugby league. It was embedded. You know, and I can compare that when I was at Hull, where the rugby league guys were really well conditioned. They had a big training age of strength and condition, whereas the Hull City football players had none at all. You know, they were just starting. You know, and it's quite funny because the manager at Hull at the time was Mark Haitley, and Mark Haitley had spent time at Glasgow Rangers, at Monaco, Inter Milan, and he basically had never heard of strength and conditioning, and he's seen it as a real threat. I really struggled to get that in place at Hull City because Mark didn't want it to take place, and he's seen it as a threat. But because David Lloyd is my boss, and the owner, then I got to make that call, and we did it. Much to Mark's annoyance, you know.
Well, progress has to come about. So if we could maybe take you there from, so rugby league, of course, is very much a regional sport within England. Of course, it's played all over the world, and there are teams in different parts of England, but the majority of the teams are condensed into this M62 area up in the northwest. And I suppose very much a community sport as well. In my experience of going to watch games, is that it's people from very much the local area that are coming into the stadiums as opposed to people traveling from far away. But so you're involved in this kind of close-knit community, which is still a global sport. But then you've moved into a series of other sports since then. So how did you make the jump? Maybe tell us a little bit about how your time in rugby league ended and where you moved to after that.
Yeah, well, you're 100% correct about the community spirit. I mean, like every club I went to, Workington, Hull, Leeds, and Helens, there was that community spirit. So it reminded me very much of home. You know, like being back home and the GAA. There's a lot of comparison between GAA players and GAA clubs and rugby league players and rugby league clubs. You know, they're working class, they're tough, they're hard. You know, they train hard. So that really, you know, sort of helped me. You know, but I was quite homesick over there. You know, and then. When I was working with St. Helens, we did the treble. We won the Super League we won the grand final at Old Trafford, and we won the World Club Challenge, beating the Brisbane Broncos. So when that happened, then the fitness coach at Ireland had left, Craig White, and the Irish national rugby team had heard about me, and they wanted me to go over and train them. Eddie O'Sullivan had become the head coach. So I went over and met him and had a good chat, and he said, look, rugby's about to take off in this country. How do you feel? And I thought, well, I'll be honest with you, it's a bit like rugby league. I know nothing about rugby union. And in fact, even when I started with Ireland, I'd never really heard of Brian O'Driscoll or Rowan O'Gara, Paul O'Connell. I mean, there were names that weren't very familiar to me. So when I decided to move back home, and I took up the post, and to be honest with you, at the start, I was horrified. Rugby league was about 10 years ahead of the rugby union at that time. Rugby union was still training like bodybuilders. They were trying to get big. There was no cognizance paid to nutrition, to recovery, to proper weight training, to specific conditioning. I mean, they were still doing 10K runs for training, doing laps of the pitch. They were still eating hamburgers and pizza. Some of the players still smoked. Mars bars were taken after training, during training. It was like a pub team, like an amateur team. And one of the other coaches who started at the same time as me, Mike Ford, who was the defence coach, he also came from rugby league. We were sitting on the bus coming home from training one day, and I said to Fordy, like, what have we done here? Like, we are behind. And, Ireland were notorious for running out of steam with 60 minutes to go, with the last 20 getting battered. And I could see why, because they were in terrible shape. Like, some of our players were fat, yet they were international rugby players. So my very first game, we played Wales at the old Lansdowne Road, and we beat them.
Can I just ask you to tell us what year this was?
Yeah, this was 2002.
Okay.
So we played Wales at Lansdowne Road, and the only reason we beat them was that Wales were in worse shape than us. They're better rugby players, but they're in worse condition. And it really was highlighted when we went to play England that year. England kicked the duff out of us, like something like 40 odd points, because they had been professional for the last 4 or 5 years. So we knew we had a job on our hands. And at that time, Ireland were working off a 3 or 4 week pre-season, which is not enough to get a Gaelic team in shape, let alone an international rugby team. So we did our 3 or 4 week pre-season that year. We went to the World Cup, got destroyed. And then I went out on a bit of a limb then. I did a big interview at the Belfast Telegraph. But before I did the interview, I agreed a 4-year contract with Eddie and the treasurer of the union. And I said, look, the only way we're going to go forward is we increase our pre-season to 8, 9, 10 weeks. And the reporter went out, he put this in the paper, and the union weren't happy. They weren't happy. And I was in Australia at the time, and they said, listen, we want you to come home because of your interview. I knew they were going to try and sack me. So while I was out in Australia on a beach, I said, well, I'll be home in a couple of weeks, and I'm not going straight away. And I went home, and we went to a tribunal, but they weren't aware that I verbally agreed a contract, which is legally binding. And they tried to sack me, but I said, well, if you sack me, you got to pay me up for 4 years. So we went through tribunal, and with Eddie and the players back me, said they want me to stay on. Got our 10 or 11 week pre-season, and we kicked on, haven't looked back since. So
yeah,
a tough love, So
it's required sometimes, isn't it?
I lasted 8 years with them, and it was great times, and like we did kick on as a team, and I made some great friends: O'Connell, O'Gara, O'Driscoll, these guys, Anthony Foley, God rest his soul, all good people, and like once they knew how to train correctly, they put in a massive shift and they got themselves in good shape.
So you've had a direct influence then as well, obviously in I suppose training the trainers or training the coaches, the generation of players which have now progressed to become coaches at the top level. You were involved in helping, I suppose, some of them open their eyes to the benefit of strength and conditioning and progressing in that way. Yeah,
I mean, I became very close with Rowan O'Gara. Like I used to spend a lot of time in his house in Cork, and a lot of times I used to train with Rowan one-on-one. Now he's taken what he learned as a player to Racing, to Crusaders. He's now at La Rochelle. Paulie was over in France. So, they picked up a lot of stuff. And look, they were great to work with, and it was good to have those relationships, and we still keep in touch, But all great people, it wasn't always plain sailing. There was a couple of fights with all of them along the way. But, like when we're there training, I'm not there to be their friend. I'm there to make them better athletes. So with those disagreements and there was conflict of opinions, but that's why they're top class athletes, because they're not robots. They have opinions and they don't always agree with what I did and what I've done.
So maybe we could just take one of those very much household names as an example. I mean, say if we took someone like Paul O'Connell and looked at where he was as an athlete when you started working with him and where he progressed to, what would be some of the main changes that you would have seen in that time?
The big changes with Paulie was a lot of the training the rugby guys were doing was aerobic. Okay, so they were training long, slow distance. There was no power on the training pitch, and then in the gym it was very much hypertrophy training. They were training to get big but not powerful. So I changed that completely, where all the training in the gym was all anaerobic, it was all Olympic lifting and like powerful to make them more powerful, and the training on the pitch became very rugby specific. Okay, so the fitness work became very explosive, very dynamic, and very much relevant to the position on the pitch. So the training that Paulie would do, because he's a forward, would be different to the training that O'Driscoll or O'Gara would do, because they play in the backs. The training that the likes of Jordan Murphy or Tommy Bowe would do, who play out in the wing, would be different to the training like Peter Stringer or Conor Murray would do, because they're playing scrum half. I made it very position specific and very explosive. And I'd look at what they would do during the game and then sort of make that the basis of my conditioning during the week.
Okay, and so not sort of content with the top level of rugby league and international standard then in the same sport and then moving to rugby union, your career then went on after that, and you worked very closely with Bernard Dunn, who ended up becoming a world champion. Would you tell us some of your recollections of that period in your life?
Yeah, again, that was just a bit like the rugby league story. It was a pure fluke. I came home during the Six Nations, won a bit of a break, and I'd moved to Belfast because my wife works in the Royal as a physio, and I needed to be in Cork, England, Dublin, Limerick, all in the 1 week. So being based in Belfast was a lot more access to airports. So I used to use a local gym called Gymco in Finnegy. So I went down to a training session, and I'm in the gym training away. I brought down some of my chains that I put on the bar to do chain squats. So I'm doing these chain squats in Gymco, and there's this wee skinny runt in a Dublin tracksuit with a beard and a hoodie over his head staring at me. And I'm doing my squats thinking, and that's the wee weed. And he looked like a drug dealer because he looked really gaunt and he had a black eye. So I did my set and put the bar down, sat down, and went to another set, and he's still staring at me. And I put the bar down again, and I goes, "Everything okay?" He going, "Yeah, you Mikey McGurn." That's my Dublin accent. That was worse than I was. Bernard Dunn, how's it going? Now, I'd heard of Bernard Dunn. He was a big celebrity. I goes, Jesus Christ, I didn't recognise you. Pleased to meet you. I goes, what happened to your eye? He goes, got knocked out. He had a fight the previous week and got knocked out in the first round. So we got chatting, and he says, would you mind training me? And I goes, Bernard, I know nothing about boxing. I know nothing. And I said,
is this how all your introductory meetings go then when you get involved in the sport?
I said, would you mind if I went and spoke to your coach? And ironically, his coach lived about 800 meters away from me. So that night we went up, had a cup of tea with his coach. I said, how can I help Bernard? And he said, look, he needs to improve his punch power and he needs to improve his resilience. I goes, okay. I goes, would you mind telling me what he's doing? And it was a typical traditional boxing training, long 10-mile runs wearing the black bin liner, doing arm curls in the gym, push-ups, losing loads of weight the week of the fight, that's the carry on. I goes, well, look, we need to change all that. Boxing is explosive, it's dynamic. And a bit like the rugby union, we just ripped up the training manual and did a lot of like explosive work, a lot of like short, sharp sprints. We did a lot of wrestling because when I analysed in boxing in his weight division, there's a lot of clinching and pushing and shoving and that carry on. Got him doing chain squats, dynamic jammer work. And then we contrasted a lot of his actual boxing with weights work. So what happened is he might do squats, come out, hit the pads, back in, do some jammer, come out, do some uppercuts, do some explosive push-ups, box jumps, and then that sort of way. So, and lo and behold, he won a couple of fights and won the world title, which for me was utopia because for 3 reasons. Number one, that afternoon, Ireland won the Grand Slam in Wales. Number two, I had 2 tickets, obviously, that was given for the fight ringside, and I went along with Sean Boylan, the GA legend, who's a good friend of mine. And number 3, Bernard won the world title that night. But the irony of that night was, and I'm a very, very mild-mannered person, but this was a real lesson to me, because all of my other sports was mainly working in teams. This was the first time I'd worked individually with somebody, and you become so close to somebody when you're working one-on-one. In the 5th round, Bernard had got knocked down, and he beat the count. He got knocked down a 2nd time in the 5th round. If he had got knocked down a 3rd time and hadn't beaten the count, he was gone. When he got knocked down the 2nd time, I actually got off my seat to get into the ring. Wasn't conscious, and Sean grabbed me and said, sit down. Like, it was just a reaction. Because how dare this guy hit my boxer? And Sean pulled me down. He got knocked down a 3rd time, but he got up, the bell went, and he ended up knocking a man down in the 11th round, and it got voted Fight of the Year. It was amazing. This is a fantastic night, fantastic day, you know.
Is that the most emotionally involved you've ever got in a competitor or a team you've been working with?
I think so, yeah. I think so. We become really close. And for me to do what I was going to do, get in the ring, because I'd invested so much time in with him, you know, because Bernard was based in Dublin for some of the training, and I didn't want Bernard having to come to Belfast to train with me. So I said, jump in the car, drive to Dublin, take the transition and drive back home again, because it's very much about being athlete-centered, you know, not coach-centered, you know. Mm-hmm. So it was it was a fantastic, I suppose, experiment doing what I did, not doing the traditional boxing method, you know. But it's funny because Bernard won and become world title, become world champion, everybody was extolling the training regime. When he lost the defense of the title in his next fight, everybody said it was because of the training regime, you know what I mean? So
you can't win.
That was good. It was very good, you know.
I can't imagine there are too many sporting settings that are more intense than the week leading up to a world title fight, you know, and I know that there's an intense amount of pressure involved in the latter stages of any top level competition or any competition that someone's involved in. But when it's 2 people about to go head to head, and you have to try and stay on your feet against someone who's very powerful and wants to knock you down, I can only imagine that the week leading up to that has got to have a different type of pressure.
Yeah, it is very intense, because obviously with boxing, a lot of it is down to money. There's a lot of money on the purse for the fighter, for the opponent, for the tickets sold. They're trying to keep their weight low, so they're not eating as many calories, so they're cranky. They're obviously nervous about you know, it's a world title fight, so it is very intense. But then it changes, because there's a lot of razzmatazz for the TV. And the minute TV cameras come around, everybody changes. It's kind of almost like surreal. It's almost like they're acting, you know. And I know Bernard's ring walk that night, he came out the Irish Rover, and because the fact that Ireland had won that day in the Grand Slam, people watched the game in the pub. The atmosphere was electric. It was in the Point Depot. The place was absolutely rocking. There was tricolours flying. You know, the place was buzzing, the Irish Rover, and it was just unbelievable. Like, the adrenaline was sky high, you know. So, you know, it is kind of, it's a really surreal experience. And, you know, there's a lot of interviews and the press build-up and weigh-ins. So, you know, there's a lot of razzmatazz and there's a lot of bull too, if I'm honest about it. So, wouldn't be my thing, but there you go, you know.
So maybe move on from boxing, and the other national team that you have worked with in an Irish context has been the international rules team.
Yes.
So what was it like getting the call up to work at international level in Gaelic games? I suppose having a personal background in it as well.
Yeah, it has to be up at one of the top there. I mean, I did 2008, 2010, and 2011. Each has a different experience. The one in 2008 was mental, because Sean Boylan was the manager, and I grew up watching Sean Boylan's teams and listening to the Sean Boylan story. So when he asked me, I was actually really nervous. I was working in Wales at the time with the Ospreys, and when I was asked to do the first session in Ashbourne, I was so nervous. I actually practiced the session over in Wales to get it right, you know, because that time there was like Stephen McDonald, Sean Kavanagh, you know, them type of players, Paddy Bradley were all involved, Kieran Donaghy, you know, them guys, like legends of the game, you know, people that I looked up to. So I practiced the session, but then there's another caveat. It went really well. I ended up taking about, I don't know, 7 or 8 sessions. But also on Sean's backroom team was legends like Owen Liston was a coach, Anthony Tohill, people who I have utmost respect for. But Sean asked me to take the last session before they flew to Australia. And I was in Wales at the time and I couldn't, there was no flights. And I said, Sean, I'd love to take the session, but I can't get a flight. He goes, don't worry, leave it with me. And Sean has a mysterious way of making things happen, but not telling you. And I'm like, Sean, I've checked. There's no flights from Cardiff to Dublin or Belfast. He says, look, leave it to me. So that was okay. And as always, Sean is very vague about things. The day before the session, he said, be at Cardiff Airport at such a time. I says, okay. He says, don't need to bring it. No, just bring your training kit. So landed up at Cardiff Airport, went into the arrivals, and there was a message come up over the intercom. Could I go to this departure area? Went to the departure area, and what was waiting but a helicopter to Ashbourne for the training. So I'm sitting on this helicopter going, this is ridiculous, like this ridiculous. I thought this better be the best training session ever. So I'm pumped up to the max. The helicopter lands in Ashbourne, players arrive, and the session is meant to start at 7 o'clock. So I have the players on the pitch and we're warming up, and in comes Sean. You know, the players are pumped up to the max. Sean goes over, lads, the owner's sister's neighbour's cat died. Can we say a wee prayer? And I goes, Boylan, you are killing me here. You are killing me. But then that was grand. That night we went back to the hotel, and he said, can I have a word? And I said, yes, Sean. He says, can you come to Australia with us? I'm like, Sean, I can't. The wife just had a first child. I'm working over in Wales. She'd kill me. He goes, please come to Australia. I go, Sean, I can't. And that was the hardest thing I've had to do, you know, refusal. But they went over and they've done really well. They won the 2 tests. Mm-hmm. So it was well deserved. And then 2010, Anthony took over as manager, and it was absolutely brilliant. Like, Anthony Tohill is a legend in the game. So to work with him in 2010, 2011 was fantastic, you know. So it was all 3 really good experiences. And it was great working with the cream of Irish GAA, all great lads, you know, every one of them from everywhere throughout Ireland, you know, and they all like, they sort of represent the GAA brilliantly, I have to say, you know.
So would that be the shortest lead-in that you've ever had into a high-level competition with a group of players, because it is such a one-off thing and comes kind of at the tail end of the season? Now, you mentioned before, of course, that the rugby union pre-season had been very short in previous years, but is that the shortest lead-in you've had to kind of build a culture within a group?
Absolutely, and not only that, Conor, because you only really select your players around sort of semi-final time of the All-Ireland. So the cream of your team are still playing semi-final or get the final. So you might not get them for 2 weeks before you actually head out to Australia, or if the test games are in Ireland. So it is very fragmented from that respect, and players have been drip-feeded to the session. So you don't have a lot of time. So you have to think. You have to really sort of maximise your time with them. You know, some players you might have 6 weeks to the first test. Other players, like in 2010, all the Dublin players didn't come in from 2 weeks before the first test, like Bernard Brogan and them guys. So they have to get up to speed pretty quick, you know. So, So what you do maybe more video work with them. So they're not actually doing the physical work, but they're doing video work, and they might come watch the sessions, but not actually do them, you
know. So something different again. Probably the last professional area we'll have a chance today to interrogate is your kind of relationship with Manchester United. There's a great rivalry in the sport development office between Manchester United and Liverpool fans. So you have support from some of us and not from others, but definitely support from me on this one. What has it been like working with United, and can you tell us a bit about your relationship there?
Yeah, well, when I was working at Hull City, the captain of the team, Warren Joyce, was always had an interest in coaching, and me and him got on really well. And we used to sit down and have coffee and speak about coaching. When Warren retired from football, he had been coaching at Manchester United Youth. So then he went into Man United and worked with under 16 and under 18s. So then he brought me in to do some work with his teams and working with the younger lads on strength and conditioning and writing programs and that sort of stuff, and heading over and supervising that sort of stuff. And then Warren moved up then, and he worked with Ryan Giggs with under 21. So the likes of Marcus Rashford and these guys all came through Warren's ranks. So it was no different really to working with any other sport. The only thing with football is you have to be a bit more cognizant of that they make a bit more money, so they're a bit more fragile when it comes to criticism. they have a bit more fragility than maybe like GA players or rugby league players, because just of the environment that they're in. You know, maybe sometimes they're treated too well, and that doesn't harden them to criticism and to sometimes to coaches really telling the truth, which they're not used to. So I had to maybe change the mindset a small bit when I went there, in that I couldn't be maybe as abrasive as I would be with the GA team or the rugby league team. But no, at the end of the day, a squat for a Man United player is the same for a squat for a GA player as it is for a rugby league player. So the actual training methods aren't that different. The only thing is that they have a lot more money, so they can use a lot more training modalities. I then became very friendly with the head of fitness at Manchester, Mick Clegg, and we did a lot of work together at Mick's base and also at their training base. And then we did a lot of work in Europe on Mick's very big in cognitive training as well as the physical side. So he introduced me to that brain training that you can do in the gym on the pitch, as well as with the weights and the fitness. And that really gave me a different dimension to my way of thinking as well. And then when I drilled down and asked Mick, you know, why did he do it? Well, he mentioned the Ronaldo situation, that when Ronaldo came to United, he wasn't developed very much physically, but also cognitively. And Mick did a lot of work with Cristiano on the cognitive side, as well as Beckham and Roy Keane. So if it works for them guys who are the best in the world, then, you know, I'm certainly into it. So he taught me very much how to incorporate cognitive training in the conditioning work as well, you know.
Yeah, I suppose just to try and round up some of that discussion we've been having there, you know, you mentioned there that a squat is the same for a soccer player as it is for a rugby player. Are there any other kind of core attributes that you've seen, I suppose, more generally in sports people around the world that you've worked with that make them successful across that kind of range of sports and a range of disciplines?
Yeah, I think the one thing, and maybe I'm barking up the wrong tree, but the one thing is desire. You know, the one thing is desire. So in rugby league, Paul Sculthorpe had massive desire. In rugby union, Paul O'Connell had massive desire. In boxing, Bernard Dunn had massive desire. In Gaelic football, Stevie McDonald had massive desire, and they were tough. They were born tough people. You need a combination of those two. In football, there's less desire because they're in an environment where there's a team of galacticos, of superstars, and I think that can weaken your desire and your ability to be tough, because you can say, well, I'm not going to put in the hard jobs because he can do it for me, you know, and it softens players, you know. So that hard work and desire is a big thing, you know.
Mm-hmm. And tell me this: when did you come to Queen's, Mick?
Good question. I think it's 5-6 years ago. So about 2013, 2014, I've been working with Aidan at Louth GA. We were working with the Louth GA team, and Aidan had asked somebody, I think Amy Davis had moved on from the role in Queen's, and he'd asked me was I interested, and I said I wasn't, and I loved it, and I still do. Like, working with student athletes is brilliant. I mean, they're pure. I mean, I'm a parent now myself, so you're working with somebody's child, and you know that. I think kids get a bad rap these days from the media, but I have to say, every year in Queen's, every student comes in that we have, they're great kids, you know, they're great manners, they're very appreciative, they've got great work ethics, because not only are they working hard for their sport or their team, they're also working hard in their medicine studying or their laws or engineering studying. So I think they're a credit to them and their families, you know, but Queen's is great.
To what extent do you have to adjust your approach for student athletes compared to professionals?
Well, it was Kevin Murray gave me the best piece of advice. Like, I'm very big on timekeeping. If you're late, you don't get in. I'm big on, if you haven't got your program, you don't get in. If you haven't got your protein shake, you know, I'm really until Dale Farm came along and provided the protein shakes. Well done, Dale Farm. But so Kevin said, look, Mick, they're here to get a degree. And that was great advice. And so I then realized, okay, they have to put their studies first, because these are big degrees they're doing, law, medicine. To put that first, and then we facilitate the training and the competition on that there. So in that respect, I don't compromise my philosophy. Okay, you get in the gym, you work hard, you rip it up and you leave. You only come in for 45 minutes. You rip the place apart with intensity. But at the same time, if they can't make the session because they have to study or they've got to go to the library, that's fine. Whereas that's a professional athlete. I don't want the excuse that you have to go and get your hair cut, get in the gym or be on the pitch. It's different with students, because as Kevin was quite rightly said, they are students and here to get a degree. And
Yeah.
you know.
So, I mean, just to round off, then, you were obviously talking about, I suppose, your own personal development a little bit towards the end of our discussion there, and things that you've picked up and learned, and how you've adjusted your approach along the way. Something else that you're really into is again coaching coaches, and you recently delivered that ASCA qualification at Queen's. Could you tell us a little bit about the kind of work that you're doing in the kind of coach education sphere?
Yeah, I mean, and I suppose the backstory to that is like I've been pontificating for years about all these rogue S&C coaches. I mean, if you're the neighbour of the manager of the Kilkeel under-18 Gaelic football team, you become the S&C coach. So and that didn't sit well with me, because you're prescribing something that can damage an athlete. Can seriously damage an athlete. So I've always had this real sort of like issue with people writing training programs who aren't qualified. So rather than keep moaning about it, I thought I'd try and do something about it. So basically, I did my professional S&C qualification in Australia. I was out working with the Brisbane Broncos, and I met the great Dan Baker, who's their S&C coach, and he's the chairman of the ASCA, the Australian Strength and Conditioning Association. And I did my level 2 professional level 2 with them. And then they asked me to deliver some courses on the level 1. So the level 1 is the very, very basic S&C coach qualification that you need. So you can prescribe training on the pitch or training in the gym. So it's safe, it's progressive, and it won't injure athletes. So now what we're going to do is Queen's going to become a hub for the ASC level 1. And we're going to try and run maybe 4 or 5 courses a year and try and get 20 coaches each course professionally qualified, so they can go out then in the community with their clubs, their teams, their athletes, and prescribe professionally qualified, safe, progressive programs for teams and athletes.
And so I'm sure people can find out more information on that through your own website, which is elitesport.com, is it?
It is McGurnEliteSport.com.
McGurnEliteSport.com. And I'm sure when those courses get back up and running, hopefully at the far end of the summer, that we'll be posting information out on our Queen Sports social media channels as well. So hopefully people can look out for that. Listen, I really enjoyed that. I hope people listening enjoyed it. And thanks very much for joining us, Mike. Real pleasure. And well, hopefully be chatting to you again in the near future.
No problem. Thanks very much. Thank you.